Hi, I'm Nima Janelle, and welcome back to my YouTube channel and web series Film in the 50s. Now, this week we'll be talking about feminism in the film An American in Paris. So before we get into that, we need to talk about a little bit of backstory about what's happening in society during this time. It's the 50s, so women are basically conformed to be into two types of roles. It's either a mother or a wife. There's not really much outside of that, but there is a slight shift in some women because it's post-war, and a lot of them had to work during this time because their husbands were away. And now a lot of them have gotten a taste for independence, so a lot of them are attracted to being more independent and being more than a housewife or a mother. So now getting into An American in Paris, the first scene that we see of a woman is of her kissing a man, which isn't anything out of the ordinary because most of the time that's where we see women is with their man. And the second scene that we see with a woman is as a chef, which was also not an uncommon thing to see because most women were looked at as chefs, mothers, wives, housekeepers. And what was interesting about that is that when the man came up to the woman and caressed her, she's a woman of size, and he caressed her body in a way that seemed slightly inappropriate and a little bit demeaning for maybe this time, but back then it might have made more sense because they're in France and it's a little bit more of a touchy-feely type of culture. But he caressed her body in a way that almost made it seem like he was trying to make everybody aware of her size, so it seemed like there was a slight undertone of being demeaning. And then from there, what I thought what was really interesting was that a lot of the male characters in the beginning got to narrate their life stories, so we got to know a lot about them because they were narrating what they liked and who they were, and what was happening with them. And I was waiting for that when it came to the women, but it never happened. And I thought it was interesting, even in the film, you know, the women still didn't have a voice. It was what we learned from the women, we learned through the eyes of the men in the film. Then we get to our main character, Jerry Mulligan, and we see him painting. And he's a real man's man, but he's also very creative and very smart. And he's approached by this young woman who wants to talk about his art. And he kind of disregards her because not only is she a woman, but she's young. So he doesn't think that she really knows enough to be knowledgeable enough about art. And then he's approached by this philanthropist named Milo. He wants to pay for his art and give him opportunities. And he's a little bit taken aback by this because I don't think that he's used to interacting with a lot of women that have that much money or power or just that much influence. Even one of the first things that he says to her is your dad rich or do you have a rich husband? Insinuating that basically she couldn't be successful or have money or be independent without a man. And I think that's really reflective of the society. There's even a scene between Jerry and his friend Henry where Henry's describing his love interest. And basically what happens is that everything that Henry says, Jerry automatically kind of combats in a negative way. So Henry would say things like, oh, she's very modest. And then Jerry would be like, oh, so she's boring. Or Henry would be like, oh, no, she's very exciting. And then Jerry would be like, oh, she's wild, she's crazy. And it kind of reflects the time of women, you know, they can't be enough. There's always something that's going to be wrong. You know, if you're too beautiful, then you're vain. And if you're not beautiful enough, then you're not worth anything. It's women have to be everything and nothing at all. Nothing can ever be enough. And the expectations of women from men is unrealistic in itself. And there's this one scene that Jerry thinks that Milo is hiring him to be a male escort. And it's funny because she just wanted to get to know him and make a business relationship. And it's funny that even though she said that, the mind of a man, a woman could only want sex. It always has to be something very physical. Even when it came to Henry describing his love interest, she still didn't have a voice. She was dancing the whole time. Even when describing her, it just showed her body. Everything was very physical because that's how they related women. It was just, everything was very, very physical. Jerry's character meets a young woman and he pursues her and she denies him multiple times and she says no and he doesn't listen and then she eventually gives in. He realizes that she was getting married and he says things like, how could you not tell me? And she had denied him multiple times. And the thing was, I think that he was more caught up in terms of the chase of her than really wanting her, because he would have listened and found out that she was engaged a long time ago. There's also the scene where Jerry brings Milo to make his love interest jealous, and it's kind of this thing of using a woman to manipulate another woman. So it's always this play with physical and objectifying women, always. There's also this other scene where Jerry walks in and he comments on what Milo's wearing and says it's a little bit too provocative, but then he also is more interested in what's underneath and comments on her breasts and her bra. So it's almost this like judgmental flirting. There's always like, I want you, but it's combated with something negative. And what I think I really loved about this movie is that they showed the two opposite spectrums of what a woman was during this time. You had the women that conformed and, you know, did what they were supposed to do and let men control them. And then you had the other side, like Milo, who was a lot more independent and a lot more assertive and a lot more vocal about what she wanted and who she was. That's why I think An American in Paris is a great way to see feminism in all of its forms, the negative and the positive, even how it influences the progressive, because then a couple years after this you have movies like Johnny Guitar with Victoria, and she's this independent, strong-witted cowgirl, and I just love the way that they blended those two characters and really reflected how men saw them during this time and during this society. I think they were very intentional in the way that they wanted to show women and the way they wanted to show men. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for lending me your time, and join me back next week for another episode of Films in the 50s. Bye, have a great day.